Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace, mercy, and blessings of God be upon you. This is a new presentation from www.central-mosque.com and the Humble Heart YouTube channel. It is the 36th episode of the Making Sense series, and today I will try to convey my perspective as to why Israel will not survive. I covered a related topic, which is available right here in the top right hand corner of your screen, as to why Iran attacked Israel. Please feel free to click here in the top right hand corner and watch that presentation. Let's continue on our topic. Before I begin, I, like any other human on this planet Earth with an ounce of humanity, absolutely deplores the barbarity and the genocide which is being committed against the Palestinian civilians, innocent civilians, women, children, babies. And I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for Allah to bring safety and security to the innocent Palestinians. And yet my presentation is not about that. It's about the bold claim that I do not believe that Israel will survive. By the way, I'm not alone in that assertion. There are plenty of thinkers out there, and I'm a nobody. This is just my innocent opinion, but there are others, very well-read researchers, who have the same perspective. Today, what I will not cover, as I said, the genocide of the Palestinians, tragic, unfortunate, and sad that it is. My presentation is not going to cover that. I'm also not going to cover the history of Hamas, particularly from 2005 onwards, when Israel retreated from the Gaza Strip and left the administration of it to Hamas. That is not the scope of our discussion. There are various reasons as to why I make the assertion that Israel will not survive, and here is my reason number one. Simple demographics. Jews are a minority in Israel. This is an excerpt from the Times of Israel. So when we talk about Israel as it is now, we talk about the Green Line Israel, which is Israel which existed pre-1967, plus Gaza, plus West Bank, and plus Golan Heights. So all of these territories taken together, the Jews are actually a minority. You need to understand that, and this is a very telling fact about the demographics of Israel. The Western media and also others, they try to twist this fact by presenting you the population demographics from Green Line Israel only, or from certain areas of Israel, and so on and so forth. When taken as a whole, the Jews are a minority in the land of Israel as it exists today. Once you've understood that point, let's move forward. In order for Israel to continue to exist, they have a number of options. Option number one, for Israel to become a democratic state, and by that I mean that all segments of the population, Arabs, Jews, Christians, etc., have equal rights under the law. If that happens, Israel will cease to exist as a Jewish state. So that is not an option that they pursue, and that is not an option that they favor, etc. The second is to have a two-state solution. So once again, if that happens, then the Palestinians will have the political capital and the will to be able to dictate and control their lives. That's also not an option. So Israel exists in number three, which is a perpetual apartheid discriminatory state. And at every level of the state, there's discrimination against the Palestinians, and not only just the Muslims, against others as well. We know from history, from South Africa, that a perpetual state of apartheid simply cannot continue. It is unsustainable, cannot continue. So the only option left is genocide, displacement, and ethnic cleansing. And this is the strategy that Israel has continued to move from its inception until now. When the so-called attack by Hamas happened on Israel, it gave an opportunity for Israel to continue on the path of genocide, ethnic cleansing, and displacement. Point number two. The Israeli military strategy is to be prepared, vigilant, and to monitor the situation not only within Israel, but also as within the Middle East and wider world. And they employ a strategy of escalation, dominance, and excessive retaliation. For me to make a civilian understand that, it simply means that if I slap you twice, you slap me 4 times. If I slap you 4 times, you slap me 16 times. That's the strategy of Israeli military: escalation, dominance, excessive retaliation. By the way, there's a book by Seymour Hersh called The Samson Option. I request all of the listeners to read that, or at least Google and read about the Samson Option. And what that basically means is Israel lashing out with a nuclear capability to actually burn the Middle East into a tinder, into ashes, if they feel threatened. Once again, based on escalation, dominance, excessive retaliation. So what happened on October 7th? The Hamas attack on Israel was an absolute surprise, and that shattered the myth of being vigilant and ready to deal with any sort of incident in Israel. So that shattered the myth of Israeli superior intelligence. Then, if you look at the Israeli Defense Forces, it basically, at that time, the total strength of active duty personnel was around 169,500 and roughly 465,000 Israelis in the reserve unit. Since the Hamas attack on October 7th, Israel has activated more than 300,000 reservists. So you can practically say that the reserves that have been activated are twice the strength of their active duty personnel. And when the Western media talks about the war, quote unquote, between Hamas and Israel, it makes people sound like, it's a war in a traditional sense between two countries, with some sort of matching, matching military capability. However, the defense budget of Israel is roughly $23.6 billion as of 2023, and that surpasses the total military spending of Egypt, Iran, Lebanon, and Jordan combined. So literally, they are trying to suppress a ragtag army of Hamas, a ragtag bunch of people of Hamas. So it isn't a war, quote unquote, in the traditional sense. However, with the active duty numbers of around 170,000, let's say, as it stands right now, and this is once again from Israeli media, the disabled in Israeli army soldiers have exceeded 70,000 for the first time. By the way, this number has been spun under, in the Middle East and other Muslim countries. It doesn't mean that they have had casualties of 70,000. The casualties since the October 7th attack has been around 9,000, let's say. So this is the total number. However, this is a huge number, right? 70,000 out of an active duty force of 170,000. Now, in the United States, because of decades of war and terror, United States had a massive number of injured, etc. But United States is a huge country with huge active duty personnel, reserve personnel. For Israel, this is a devastatingly high number. Okay, and it says that 35% of them are dealing with mental health, while 25% are dealing with physical injuries, etc. And they're saying that they're preparing to receive even 20,000 more by the end of 2024. So that is a huge blow to take for any military when their total injured are roughly 50% of their active duty personnel. Now, unlike what the media tells you, the Israeli army and the IDF has taken huge losses, and it is quite clear from their urgent need to mobilize more troops, their urgent tactical pauses, etc. And they've even, the Israeli top military spokesman, the admiral, says that Hamas cannot be made to disappear, and they've actually introduced tactical pauses as I'm making this presentation to you. So why would you, despite activating almost twice the number of your active duty personnel, having a tactical pause and still trying to look for more troops, there are clear signs of Israeli army weariness, and I'm saying that completely from a military perspective. And by the way, within Israeli society, there's a huge divide because the ultra-Orthodox are exempt from conscription. That is a huge point of contention within the Israeli military, and any young person who wants to avoid the conscription, sorry, can't speak, just has to register to study in one of these ultra-Orthodox Jewish schools, and they're then exempt. Another reason for what I say Israel will not survive is simply for economic reasons. Now, the Israeli tech industry, they always wanted to project themselves to be at the bleeding edge of technology, and the Israeli tech exits were already slumping around 56% before the attack, the October 7th attack with Hamas. Now, in 2024, it has become catastrophically bad, and the Israeli media is saying that the tech industry is in its worst downturn ever, worse than the blowout following the dot-com bubble of the early 2000s, and much worse than the fallout from the mid-2000s. Continuing on the financial strength, the financial strength of Israel has also been devastated. They need to borrow about $58 billion this year in 2024. That's $23,000 per household, and to put that in perspective, that is about 3 times the size of the budget deficit of 2022. So within 2 years, the borrowing is over 3 times the size of the deficit in 2022. More reasons. Israel was formed and projected as a Zionist state for Jews all over the world to immigrate into Israel. What we're seeing is a large number of Israelis actually leaving because it is no longer safe to reside in Israel. Another reason, which continues to exacerbate that trend of people leaving Israel, is a number of countries recognizing Palestine. So this was already on the rise before the barbarity that Israel is afflicting on the Palestinians. However, it has literally become a pariah state because of its actions, clear genocide, and that trend has continued. So if you look at this map, and this is, by the way, an older projection, but I just wanted to make this point. If you look at it visually, who do you see not recognizing Israel? United States, Canada, Australia, and a few European countries, right? Apart from there, literally the whole world has recognized the state of Palestine. Although, it's of little practical consequence, but that tells you how much of a pariah state Israel has become. And lastly, as I record this, there's a possibility that there's going to be an attack by Israel on Hezbollah, and that's a different challenge altogether than Hamas, right? They have been unable to, as the words of the Israeli government, wipe out Hamas. They've not been able to do that. Hezbollah is a pretty effective force. They have, guided missiles and other military technology that it's going to be very difficult for Israel to deal with. So not only just from a military perspective, if the war with Hezbollah goes ahead, then someone within a company, a power company in Israel, said that Israel is unprepared for a full-blown war with Hezbollah because within 72 hours there will be power shortages and Israel will become uninhabitable. By the way, there's a history in Israel of people making remarks and then due to public pressure being made to either retract that or say, hey, I misspoke, I didn't mean this, or I didn't mean that. This is another example of that. Another thing you need to realize is if you look at the state of Israel, Jordan is pretty much a de facto province or a state of Israel. So, those who want to fight, on behalf of Israel can simply take a ticket, land, and in Tel Aviv, pick up a weapon and go. But those who want to protect the Palestinians, protect the genocide of Palestinians, cannot, because they cannot even enter Israel, right? If a war between Israel and Lebanon or Hezbollah rather happens, Israel will have to cross the border, put boots on the ground. What that means is Israel is already at its capacity. In fact, it's it's exceeded its capacity by just trying to counter Hamas. If a war with Hezbollah happens, then Israel is going to have to rely on American boots on the ground, or European or NATO boots on the ground, or some combination of that nature. And that means that basically opening up these borders for those who want to defend the genocide of Palestinians to be able to come in direct contact with Israel. This is a nightmare scenario, okay? And that is the reason why the United States is not keen on Israel trying to engage Hezbollah, because it will open up the Middle East and the wider world for access, which currently people do not have to Israel, because Jordan is as I said, is a de facto Israeli province or state. So this was there were several of my reasons as to why I say that Israel will not survive. There are other intellectuals out there who put a date to it and say Israel will not survive beyond 2030. What I'm trying to say here is, if we look at this map, is Israel will not survive in its current configuration. That's an impossibility, right? The reason the countries like to create a buffer zone. So Turkey has done that, across their border with Syria. They try to create a buffer zone to stop people from coming into their country. Israel already has a buffer zone of Jordan, right? But if they start a conflict with Lebanon, this gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So Israel, in its current configuration, it's an inevitability that they will not survive. They will have to carry on unless they take over the whole of the Middle East, which is an impossibility. So Americans jump into the war, American boots on the ground, which will bring more and more resentment from the wider world against American actions. And by the way, America is in an election year, and Americans do not want to wage war. And there's genuine disagreement from the Americans on putting boots on the ground to protect Israel. So that's not going to happen. So those were some of my reasons. And as I said, some are trying to put the figure of 2030. I don't know. I don't know the future. All I'm saying is it's the trajectory upon which Israel has embarked, right? It's inevitable that Israel will simply not survive. It just will not, right? Looking at the demographics, looking at the size, looking at the resources, looking at the financial impact, that's just not going to happen. Jazakallahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.